There is a kingdom where
Hey, and welcome to this week's coaching video for small group leaders at Dayspring. This video that you're watching is designed for those who lead small groups on campus on a Sunday morning for either adults or students. So if you lead a small group on campus Sunday morning at Dayspring and you're going to be teaching a lesson on September the 29th, then you're in the right place. You're going to need a few things with you as we get started. Need you about 20 minutes of time blocked out. You're also going to need your teaching transcript, which you should have by now. It should be sent to you. It's dated September the 29th. And you need something to write with, because what I'm going to do is talk you through this transcript. I'm going to give you some pointers along the way that hopefully make it a little easier for you to teach it. All right? So if you got those things, we're ready to go. If you look at it on page 1, you've got your introduction to your lesson to kind of help you see what it is you're going to be teaching, the big picture. And here it is. You'll see it says on your lesson overview that the point that you're teaching on this lesson, it says right there, that God has you on this earth for a reason, and that reason is to be His representative. That's what this lesson is all about, why God has us on this earth and what we're supposed to be doing. So this is about the mission that we have, assigned by God Himself, that mission being to make disciples, to make Him known. So the lesson's going to come out of Matthew chapter 28, very, very familiar passage, and you're going to see you've got a teaching tip on your handout about that. This is a very, very familiar passage to a lot of people who've been around church a while, and that can be a detriment to learning it. So guard against that in your study and in your presentation. But that's what this lesson is all about. This complements the Sunday sermon, which will be found in the Gospel of John, chapter 9, about a guy who was healed and then tells his story. This is a message that helps us know how to communicate the gospel to people, because that's in fact what God has commissioned us to do. So look at your teaching transcript. Let's get to page 2. This is where you're going to start teaching your class. Now, page 2 and page 3 is the introduction to your lesson. Of course, if you're a 1030 group, you've got your teaching tips on the side there that help you know how to get your lesson started. But even if you get your lesson started the way those teaching tips suggest, this illustration is probably still going to come in handy, okay? Now, the opening illustration has to do with technology. So if just by watching this video, if this is about as technologically savvy as you get as watching this video, you may not understand some of the verbiage here, but you can still tell this story, okay? And here's basically what it is. It talks about a guy named Steve Wilhite. And 25 years ago, Steve Wilhite invented a kind of file, an electronic file called a GIF file. Now, what's funny about that, the GIF file, you have people who pronounce it differently. Some pronounce it GIF, some pronounce it GIF. GIF, is it GIF or is it GIF? And you've got a little question there where you can ask people, how do you think it's pronounced? And, if you've got some people who are really living in the world of technology, they may know the answer here. You may have others who are going, what are you talking about? Files and all that. But my point is, Steve Wilhite, 25 years ago, invented a file, a GIF file. And since that time, people have pronounced it differently. What's funny is that in recent days, there's been a little bit of a debate as to how the thing is actually pronounced. And it's pretty funny. You've had different people weigh in on it. Is it GIF? Is it GIF? A lot of people have talked about it. Even the White House, by the way, has an opinion about it. The White House has come out and said, oh yeah, it's GIF, as in like a hard G. It's a GIF. Here's what's funny. Steve Wilhite recently, I guess he got tired of hearing people talk about it. He issued a statement. Here's his official statement. It's a soft G, pronounced GIF. End of story. So Steve Wilhite put an end to the debate. It is a soft G, GIF. So for all you GIF pronouncers, I hate to tell you, but the creator himself of the GIF file has spoken. But here's what's funny. A lot of people still call it GIF, even though the creator himself has said, no, it's GIF. And the bottom line is, since most people seem to have been calling it a GIF, a lot of people say, well, then that's what it's supposed to be. Despite the fact that the creator of the GIF file says, no, here's what it is. Now, here's the point in all of this. Look at the bottom of page 2, at that big paragraph toward the bottom. Here's the whole point of this opening illustration. It says, this whole episode is somewhat indicative of an attitude that prevails in modern culture. And here's that attitude. If pretty much everyone agrees on something, then it must be true. That consensus determines reality. That authorial intent means little, if anything, if stacked against the weight of popular opinion. So the point is this: even though the creator of the GIF file has spoken, there are people who have other ideas, and because so many other people have that other idea, it's kind of accepted as okay. Now move over into page 3. This is where this illustration all ties in the lesson that we're doing here. Basically, the point is this: that the GIF file, the GIF file, which by the way I've always said GIF, so I guess I've been wrong. The GIF file is a perfect illustration that there are times where we call our own shots despite the fact that our Creator has said otherwise. And the reality is, even in living out the flow of our entire lives, sometimes we live a purpose and an intent and a mission that's different than what's been defined by us by our Creator. That's the whole point of that illustration. It's spelled out there for you on pages 2 and 3. Get familiar with it so you can tell that story. But look at the last thing on page 3. This is what segues you into teaching your text. After going through all of that, you say, let's look back today with fresh eyes, asking this question: what is the purpose given to me by my Creator as I live on this earth? So that's what the opening illustration is all about. You use Steve Wilhite and his GIF file as an example, that sometimes we're doing something different, or we're saying something different than the Creator himself. And when it comes to what the point is, why am I living on this life? What am I supposed to be living for? My Creator's already defined that. So we're going to look at it with fresh eyes. Matthew chapter 28. So look at page 4 on your handout, all right? You're going to have everybody open up. There's some context that you can set. That's on your transcript. I'm not going to teach it to you. Then you're going to get into the teaching of the text by having somebody read it. Now, let me say this to you, okay? Because this is pretty important about this lesson you're about to teach. This lesson is going to get into some technical things as it relates to grammar, all right? Specifically Greek grammar. Now, I know you may be listening to this going, Greek grammar? I hardly have, I haven't even mastered English grammar yet. What do I know about Greek grammar? Well, here's why you're going to do this. And just let me give you a little bit of a recap as to how we even have our Bible. When the Bible was written, the New Testament portions of the Bible were originally written in a very specific Greek dialect, okay? So in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, when they're writing their Gospels, they're not writing in English, obviously. They didn't speak English. They wrote in a form of Greek language. Fortunately and thankfully, those original manuscripts have been translated into hundreds of different languages so that people like us who don't speak that language can read the Bible and hear what it says. Now, you're going to be talking about in this lesson, you're going to be looking at the Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28, verses 16 through 20, but you're going to talk a lot about the verbs and some of the other words in that sentence, not the English words, but the Greek words. And I know that you're thinking, well, I don't even know Greek. How can I teach it? You don't have to be a Greek expert, and you don't have to pretend that you're a Greek expert, okay? Everybody knows you're not a Greek expert. You're just teaching the lesson, and you're going to be helping them understand what it was that Jesus said in the context of Matthew 28, in the language that it was recorded in Matthew 28. And again, you don't have to pretend to be an expert, but I do want to tell you this, that what you're going to be teaching, the information that you're going to be teaching about these Greek verbs and all of those things, that information is accurate and it is correct. So even though you don't understand Greek, what you're going to be saying about Greek, you can have confidence in that, okay? So let's look at it. Let's look at all of this. Now that you know that you're going to be getting into, grammar stuff, which I'm sure excites you a great deal. Page 4, here's the outline. After you've read Matthew chapter 28, verses 16 through 20, you've had somebody read it, you're going to get into teaching the text. And it's really a 2-point outline, okay? First point is the command, and then the second point is the process. So let's talk about point number 1 here on page 4, the command. This is where you're going to get into some Greek and some grammar stuff. Now, after you read Matthew 28, verses 16 through 20, here's what you're going to do. You're going to start talking about an imperative verb. And this is, again, it's all laid out for you in your transcript. An imperative is a verb that gives a command, okay? So an imperative verb gives a command. Here's the question you're going to ask. As you have everybody looking at the Great Commission there that you just read, here's the question. When you look at these verses, what verb do you see that's given as a command? Which one is spoken in the imperative verb tense? So now as everybody looks at that, you've got several verbs in this. Go into the world, make disciples of all nations, baptizing and teaching, okay? as people look at that, they've got some choices of verbs. Undoubtedly, some are going to say go. That is a command. Some are going to point out make disciples. That's a command. Some may even say the teaching and the baptizing, which those aren't command form. Here's what you're getting at, and this may be a surprise. In this Great Commission, there is one statement that's an imperative, one verb that is a command, and it's not the word go. Go in the Greek language is not written as an imperative, but here's the one that is. Make disciples. That's the command, okay? So that's the whole point of page 4. That's spelled out there for you about the tenses and all of that stuff. But the word go in the Greek language is not written in a command form. Now, at this point, somebody might tell you, well, then why does it read like that in our Bibles? Well, just remind them at that point that it's hard to go from language to language sometimes and to really capture the essence of what one language says in another language. And that's really what we're teaching here, and that's why we're teaching it. So this isn't intended to make people less confident in their English translations. We have really good English translations. We're just helping to really understand the text now, okay? So the whole point of this, as you get there on page 4, and now move into page 5 on your transcript, the whole point of that is this. The command from God is to make disciples. That's the command, not to go, but to make disciples. And look at page 5 on your handout, the very top. It says the first verb, go, isn't spoken in an imperative tense, nor is it the main verb in this passage. The main verb in this statement that Jesus makes is make disciples. That's the main verb. So we can rightly assume that the main thing Jesus wanted his disciples to do after he ascended back to heaven was make disciples. That's the whole point of point 1 on your handout. The whole point right there of the command is that we know what the command is. Make disciples has been commanded to us by Jesus. Commanded. Make disciples. That's the what, okay? That moves us into part 2 of your handout there on page 5, the process, which is basically the how. Make disciples is what? It's an imperative. But how do we do that? Well, to answer that, we're going to get back into some grammar again. Look at the question there on page 5. At this point, you're going to ask another grammar question. You've already asked them if they know what an imperative is. Now you're going to ask them if they know what a participle is. All right? A participle. And in case you need some grammar recap, here's what a participle is. Participle, basically, it's a verb that sounds more like a noun or an adjective. Okay? Oftentimes, almost all the time, a participle ends in ing. It's a verb, but it sounds like a noun or an adjective. For example, the verb running. That's a verb. I'm running. But it can sound like an adjective. If I said, yeah, the running man was the one I was pointing out to you. Well, that sounds like an adjective. Or it can sound like a noun. Running is something I like to do. Which, by that way, that statement's a complete lie. I don't like to run. But in that instance, running is a participle. Running is something I like to do, or the running man is the one I was pointing out to you. That's what a participle is. Now, here's what you're going to get at. Here's the whole point of that. You've got a question there on page 5, another question. You say, look back at our passage again. How many participles do you see? And read that passage to them so they can look for them as you read them. Now, here's the deal. Everybody's going to find baptizing. Everybody's going to find teaching. Those are the clear participles. Here's the point at the bottom of page 5. The verb go, although in English that appears to be a command, an imperative, it's not. In the language of the New Testament, in Matthew chapter 28, that verb is clearly a participle. It's a participle. So look at the last paragraph in page 5 there. It says, the reason I tell you all of this is because it is in these 3 participles that we find the answer to the process of how we make disciples. It involves going, baptizing, and teaching. So the command, make disciples. How do we make disciples? In going, baptizing, and teaching. So what you're going to do now at this point, page 6, you're going to look at those 3 participles one at a time. Going, baptizing, and teaching. And let me just breeze through them, okay, and kind of recap your pages for you. On page 6, you're going to talk about going. And you've got an opening question there. If you have anybody who's ever been on a mission trip, ask them, have you ever been on a mission trip before? And if you have some people, that'd be great. If you don't, and if you yourself haven't been on one, you can say, well, here's what happens when people go on mission trips, I've been told. And then you can share this. Basically, the point here that's being spelled out for you in the top of page 6 is this. That when somebody goes on a mission trip, it's like they have a totally different mindset. And I can testify to this. When you go on a mission trip, you are there on a mission. So, I mean, every day, every opportunity, you're looking as an opportunity. You're looking at people going, hey, should we go help them? Hey, should we go preach the gospel to them? Hey, should we do this? You are living, there's this mindset of, it is a mission mindset because you have gone on a mission trip, okay? But what happens, I don't know why we do this, but we get back home and all of a sudden we kind of get out of that mindset. We quit looking at our neighbors, our friends like we're, missionaries anymore. You know why? Because we feel like we're back home. Now, here's the point of page 4. Here's the whole point of this. Jesus said he didn't command us to go anywhere. He said, as you are going. In other words, as you live out the flow of your life, make disciples. So here's the whole point of page 6, what you're trying to get at. We have to change our thinking. We have to change our thinking. Every day, we need to think as if we are a missionary. You know why? Because we actually are one. This world is not our home. We're somewhere else. So we need to live every day understanding that that's the process of going. So there's a great paragraph there on the bottom of page 6, a pretty big one. It starts talking about how we need to start thinking in terms of mission. That wherever you are, whether it's school, work, home, an activity, you need to have the mentality in that place, I'm on a missionary trip. That's what we're being told here in the Great Commission. As you are living your life, really, as you're going, wherever that is, whenever it is, make disciples. So that's what going is all about there. Look at the bottom of page 6. I'll just read that to you. It says, changing our mindset is the first step in fulfilling our God-given role of making disciples on this earth. Because you begin to fulfill your purpose by making disciples when you realize that you're always on mission for God. Okay, so that's the going part. Now look at page 7, baptizing. Baptizing. The what is making disciples. How? Going. That's a mindset thing. Baptizing. Now this is important. There's a key phrase on this page that you need to get familiar with as you teach it. It's on the top paragraph. Second sentence. Look at this. Think of this participle of baptizing in these terms. Here's what this word is really getting at. It's the progression of someone moving from being a person who has seen and heard the gospel from someone living in the light, from them moving to now becoming a person who has accepted the invitation to also walk in the light. You need to underline that sentence or highlight it. You need to read it twice to your folks. Baptizing, in the context of the Great Commission, it's the process of someone having seen you as you go about. The gospel has come to them through you as you go about. Now they've accepted the invitation to join you in walking with Jesus. That's what this whole thing of baptize is talking about here. Now, there's a question you'll ask about baptism and some explanation under that. And here's what page 7 is getting at, okay? When it talks about baptizing, it's talking about more than just putting somebody in water, okay? Just the ritual of it. In the New Testament, every now and then we'll talk in terms of somebody making a profession of faith. That's what we talk about when somebody gets saved. Oh, they made a profession of faith. And in some churches, they'll use that term maybe if somebody let somebody know about that by maybe walking down an aisle at the end of a service or whatever, and they made a profession of faith. In the New Testament, a person's profession of faith was them being baptized, okay? Their baptism was I'm drawing a line in the sand. I'm not turning back. I am following Jesus from this point on, all right? So when the New Testament talks of baptizing, going and baptizing, it's talking about really more of a formal invitation to walk in the same way that I'm walking, to follow the same God I'm following. So look at the paragraph there at the very bottom above the 2 questions. It says, we must remember that part of disciple making is calling people to a tangible commitment of themselves to the Lord. We cannot settle with just living a good life in front of people. We must also tell them why we live good lives and then invite them into that same life. So making disciples, it involves going, which is a mindset thing. As I go, I'm a missionary. It involves baptizing, which is inviting people in to walk in the light also. Here's the third thing, page 8, teaching. So the process, going, baptizing, teaching. When it comes to teaching, you're going to go back to a grammar lesson again. It's going to make everybody excited. Look at the question. What's a pronoun? What's a pronoun? There's your description of what a pronoun is in case you can't remember technically. Basically, pronoun's a short word that takes the place of a noun. You, her, him, etc. You're going to look back at the Great Commission, and you're going to notice the pronoun at the very end, and you're going to read this to them. It said, the pronoun attached to teaching, that is. Jesus said, teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. Teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. Now, there are two implications in this, and that's spelled out for you on your handout there. Implication one, that teaching someone to be a disciple means that we give them the opportunity to see us up close, to observe us, okay? So when Jesus said, going, as you go about, wherever and whenever you are, baptizing, drawing them in, inviting them in a tangible way, teaching. When he said teaching, he means allowing them in an up-close way to observe how faith is done by watching us, okay? So implication one is that we have to give them the opportunity to see us do faith up close and personal. Here's the second implication, right there on your page, that second bold print statement. You can't make disciples if you aren't living the life of a disciple. You can't ask somebody to watch you and see what faith is like if you're not living out that faith, okay? So part of the Great Commission of making disciples, which involves teaching, means that we are giving somebody an example to follow. In fact, you see in your little factoid on there on page 8, it's pretty interesting, that in the New Testament language, the words obey and observe are linked together and often even used interchangeably. So for somebody to obey means that they have observed. They know exactly what they're supposed to be doing because they're, in essence, imitating somebody. Hey, here's some verses you can write down in your margin. They're not on your handout. But write these down as you think about this whole concept of modeling your faith and inviting somebody to learn from you. Here's some verses to write down because the Apostle Paul, I think, was the master disciple maker. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. Jot that one down. Look it up as you study. Maybe even use it as you teach. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. Also, Philippians 4, verse 9. Philippians 4, verse 9. Look those up as you prepare this part on teaching. And here are a couple of other verses. As the Apostle Paul discipled Timothy, look up these couple of verses with Timothy. 2 Timothy 1, verse 13. Look that one up and see what Paul said to Timothy. And then also 1 Timothy 4, 16 and 17. Look that one up as well. So there's some verses that may come in handy as you teach this part, or it might just help you in your study and understanding what it means in the Great Commission when it says that we are to be teaching, okay? So, make disciples. That's the imperative. That's the command. How do we do that? Well, going, understanding where we are. We're a missionary in that moment. Baptizing, which means drawing people in to where they can make a formal commitment to Jesus with us. And teaching, which means modeling, showing them that the gospel is heard from us and then seen in us, okay? You've got a recap of all of that on page 8. So you've taught the lesson at that point, all right? You have taught that God has commanded us to make disciples and that there's a process involved. Having done that, you're going to move to the application moment on page 9, and this one's really critical this week, okay? This is where this very familiar Great Commission, we're so familiar with it, we got a nickname for it. This is where we're going to get really personal with it. So don't skip this application moment. Now, one thing you can do this week, if you just want to change pace, if you don't want to break people into clusters of 4 or 5, you can facilitate the application moment yourself with the whole group, if that fits, okay? But you might want to break them into groups. But at this point, distribute the handout. Flip over to page 11 and look at the handout, okay? Here's your handout, and this is a great application moment for your group, all right? Look at this, page 11. 3 steps. Number one, they're going to kind of do privately. This isn't an everybody kind of an experiment. But look at step number one. It says, think through where you're going to be going in the next 2 or 3 days. All right? And this is tied into our lesson. As you are going, that's the Great Commission. Wherever you go, wherever you find yourself. Think about where you're going to be going in the next 2 or 3 days. Are there some specific people that you're more than likely going to spend time with who've never started following Jesus? So who are you going to be around this week that aren't following Jesus? At that part of their handout, you're coaching them to write those people's names down or their initials. 3 different people, maybe up to 3, maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe more. But who are you going to be around this week as you go that doesn't know Jesus? Write those names down. Now, here's where you're going to go from there. Number 2 on the handout. It says, in light of what we've learned today about Jesus' command for us to make disciples wherever we go and whenever we go there, read the following verses out loud together. Now, again, you can facilitate this, or this part they can do in their groups together. But here's what they're going to do. You've got 3 passages. Each has a blank spot beside them. Here's what they're going to write in the blanks. They're going to, after each one is read, they're going to write down something based on that passage that teaches us something about what's necessary for us to effectively share the gospel in such a way that others receive it. That's a long sentence, but basically, when you read Ephesians 2, verses 8 through 10, what is that telling me that I'm going to have to do in order to present the gospel in a way that somebody's going to receive it? What am I going to have to do? Same with 1 Peter 2, 11 and 12. The same with Colossians 4, 2 and 6. So basically, they should have things written down like this. According to Ephesians 2, 8 through 10, I'm going to have to live my life a way that people define it as good. I'm going to have to live a good life and be seen, okay, doing that. 1 Peter 2, 11 and 12, again, there's going to have to be a witness of a godly lifestyle in my life that people take notice of. The Colossians 4 passage, this is a great one. That involves prayer and praying for those who need to be saved, really praying for us who need to share the gospel with them. So they should go through there and they should have 3 things that really are critical if we're going to share the gospel in a way that it's going to be received. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. Look at discussion point number 3. And again, this is supposed to be penetrating. And you can guide this from your teaching post, or they can work through this together in their clusters. But look at it. It says, look over the statements that you just read. Now look back at the names of the people that you wrote at the top of the sheet. Are you getting a sense of what God wants you to do here on this earth? And remember, this is an imperative command. We're connecting the dots now. There are specific people that you know, and you know that they don't follow Jesus, that they don't know Jesus. As you are going this week, you're going to be about them. Here's the question. Are you going to be doing the things necessary to invite them into this life to where they'll follow Jesus too? This is where the rubber hits the road, all right? Once you've worked through that handout, you can wrap it all up on page 10. There's your conclusion. At the very top, it basically is saying this, and I'll just read it to you, that if we dedicate our lives to anything other than making disciples, then we're disregarding the very thing our Creator has commanded us to do. Kind of like people who refuse to acknowledge the GIF file, and they're going to call it a GIF, regardless of what the creator of the GIF said. When we live our lives for any other purpose and any other aim and any other priority than disciple making, then what we're doing is we are redefining our purpose, though it's already been defined by our Creator. All right? So that's your lesson this week. You can conclude it. You might want to conclude it a different way this week, and that's written there in your coaching tip. It might be good this week to allow people to pray for those names that they wrote down, those folks who need to find Jesus. They may want to pray for those people, but better yet, to help them practice that Colossians 4 passage that talks about us praying for each other. Maybe you ought to have each other pray for one another, that this week that they would notice the opportunity and seize the opportunity to do the very thing that God has them on earth to do, which is make disciples. Hey, I hope this coaching video has been helpful to you. It ought to be a good lesson. Hope you have some great discussion from it. God bless you.